Hey, everybody, and welcome to day 30 of 31 and 31. And today's movie is Antlers. So, I know this is a really new movie, and in this talk that we're going to talk about, we're going to be putting spoilers above the top, and it's going to be a little more of a review than normally. So, the other thing I want to preface this with is that I did see this on the 29th and not necessarily on the 30th, because Paranormal Pat, he's going out for the weekend. He really wanted to see the movie, and I wanted to do it for this. And he's like, well, maybe we can go see it instead before I leave. And I was like, I don't force you to do anything. But he's like, no, I really want to see this movie too. So we both went and saw the movie along with everybody else. But this, I want to talk about this movie for day 30. So Antlers itself, what's the movie about? It's basically, it starts off with a father and son, and the father's working in a mine. I made a really dumb joke. I'm like, oh, that's a perfect place to make meth down there. And then, yeah, that's what they were doing in there. And while they're in there, they awaken a Wendigo. And then that, attacks him. And then we see the son for a second, then it cuts away, and we're 3 weeks later where we meet Lucas and we meet our main female star. I think it's Julia is the name of the character. I could totally be wrong. This is kind of reaction, but Lucas is kind of pegged into my mind because it's easy to remember. And he's in her class, and basically he is kind of taking care of his father and his brother as they're going through the whole transformation into a Wendigo. Now, this is based on a short story. And from what I understand and what I've been reading around kind of after I came back and I started doing some stuff, and I decided to look at what people thought about it. And it seems like a lot of people that like the short story really had problems with this movie. Now, I'm not coming from that. So, what you're going to get is my reaction and how I felt about the movie in general. So, basically, you have him taking care of his brother and his father. And then we've got the teacher. She's going in and she's starting to investigate what's going on because she's got a history of abuse. And that is leading her to see the signs within him and trying to, connect to the kid and find out what's going on with them, and not realizing what he's doing is based upon what's happening to his family. So there are negatives and positives in this movie. Generally, I like this movie. The negatives that I really have is kind of that it's a little bleak, right? Everything just seems from the town, basically losing itself because the coal business is going out due to environmental regulations that they can't mine for coal anymore. So you see people standing in line waiting to go get their, unemployment checks, and everybody just looks like they've just had one big downer to her like backstory. And from what I understand, in comparison to the story, you get a lot more of that in there rather than in this movie where it's just kind of touched upon. So like the major complaint I have about it, and I see from a lot of people, is that that's not expanded upon. Like this movie tries to do it. Like it either, I feel like the movie should either do one of two things. Either it should put more of it in there, or it should put a lot less. Like I get it, the way that this movie is doing it is trying to make it so that she has a way that she can connect to Lucas, right? They both have a history of abuse. Their parents both, or their mother both died, when they were young, and then their father's been around, and from what she believes is going on currently is like what she had experienced, when she was young as well, around his age. But there is no resolution to the whole thing, and you don't get a clear picture of what's going on in that. And so if you're going to tone that down a lot, from what I understand of the story, it's a lot more than this. But if you're going to tone this down, like maybe just make it almost nothing. Like just have it be part of the story later on. And she just explains, rather than having these weird kind of flashbacks and you see your father naked in the bed for some reason in one scene, and then you never really come back to it. And she has, and the police officer that's her brother in the movie is not related to her at all in the original story. And so that's, something that is much different than what we see here in this film. And the problem I think that stems from that is that there is no resolution between the two, even though we're kind of expecting there to be something. that, there is one time where he's like, well, you don't know what I went through, but they never really expanded upon it. And that's where I feel like you either got to give it your all and give us everything, or give us almost nothing if you want it just to be like a connecting piece. And that's honestly kind of where I've kind of find most of the faults with the film, other than there are some dumb choices by characters, to fill horror movie tropes. And that just kind of happens, that always happens in these types of films. Now, the good of the film, I think the acting is really good. I think Lucas kicks ass. I think that kid is really great for the role, and for him to kind of do like, either they found a kid that looked like that had that gauntness, that had, you know, the look that he's been a neglected and malnourished child, or the kid actually went through some of this stuff to do it. I applaud him. I think that he plays the role really well. I think that he's probably the best person in this movie. Besides the person that plays the teacher, I know that she was in Waitress. I just cannot remember her name for the life of me, and I feel really terrible for that. But she was pretty solid too, for the most part, for what she was. And then every other character was relatively well acted. Like, usually when you take a movie like this and you try to make it a little more serious in the monster movie category, and try to like compare it to and create these metaphors within it, they always seem to lose something. And it's usually in the part of like the acting. The acting kind of loses itself. Here, it's not the acting that's bad. It's some parts of the story that just aren't really well done, right? The other goods of the film, the cinematography, like I said, it's absolutely fantastic. It does give you that sense of bleakness and misery and all that stuff, with all the fog and the lower light shots, and those shots are really good. The transformation scene for the Wendigo I thought was really good. I thought the Wendigo itself looked fantastic. It is all practical, pretty much. Not to say there's not some CGI, but for the most part, it's a guy in a suit. And it makes you wonder, why don't we do this? I know it was produced by Del Toro, and that's probably one of those things that Del Toro was like, look, you got to do this, because if you're coming back to this film, it's probably going to stand the test of time if you really liked it, if you see it again. Because there are movies that I really like, but then you look at the CGI that's used in that, and you're like, oh, that just does not hold up today. Like, a good example of that is The Frighteners. I fucking love The Frighteners. But today, after seeing so much other stuff and it being so well done, produced, and how it blends into everything, and then seeing the way everything looks in The Frighteners, it just doesn't, like, not the dead people, but like death itself. It just doesn't, it seems to stand out a lot, right? But if it was a practical effect, it would have stood the test of time. And that movie is still great, right? But it just seems a little out of place as you watch it now, because you're more accustomed to what you're seeing right now than what you saw in the past. And here, like, when you finally get that full-fledged shot, other than making a fucking turkey joke, it is really fucking cool. And under my breath, I know I said that's awesome. And also, the film's not afraid to kill kids. Take that as you will. And whatever it is, I applaud a horror movie that will do that. That will actually have a scene. Not doesn't have to be graphic. It doesn't have to be whatever. But like, they stay away. Like, the kids somehow just get out in just the middle of nowhere. Where it's not like it's a trick or treat situation where the kids are killed by other kids. But you don't really see monster movies where the monster picks up a kid and totally obliterates the guy. There is a movie, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I remember watching it for the first time, and they exploded a kid into blood. And I'm not saying that you need to do that, but I was like, wow, they actually did that. I know that I'm in for a pretty fun time if they're willing to kind of throw other things out, like, the things that people don't want you to do. The gore effects are pretty good, and there's some really great makeup with some of the bodies that are like torn up, and they actually show you this stuff. Even some of the animals there, it looks really great, and it's all practical. Yeah, maybe one part it looks a little cheesy, but I still think that it looks better than what I would have seen in some of these other movies that I've watched, where you have all the CGI blood and the CGI gore, and it just totally brings everything fucking down. Where here, I feel like on that merit, it really works really well. So it's one of those films where, like, I'm really torn on what I would rate this type of movie. And originally I kind of went through the whole thing, and I'm like, well, it's not really good enough to get that 4 rating. It's not really Yeah, I just can't give it a 3 though, because I just don't feel like it's right. And this is one of the few cases where I'm gonna actually give it a point 0.5 above. I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5 antlers. I think that if it just did a little bit stuff like the stuff differently with the our main heroine, the teacher here, and her past, if it actually, like I said, it just needed to show just a little bit more on that and give us some type of resolution, or resolution, not a revolution, but a resolution to that whole storyline, or really go in depth when she's explained to the kid that, no, look, this was really bad to me. I understand what you're going through. There is a scene where like you see her and she's like buying alcohol all the time. And then there's another scene where she chooses not to buy the alcohol at that point. And then she's talking to the one of the principal and trying to be like, look, I know where this is coming from. And then the lady kind of blows it. We're not experts on child neglect and child abuse. And then she's like, speaking from somebody that, really understands this. It's one of those things where like here are just subtle hints, but if the story was much more brutal and they just don't want to show that brutality of what was going on with her, I kind of get it. But at the same time, I don't think if you're gonna take like the brutality out of that and to really show us why there is this big connection that's there, you need to either show it or you need to remove it completely and just make it something much later on in the film. That's my biggest complaint with this movie. Other than that, I don't mind that it moves slow, and it moves slow in the right spot. It moves slow in the beginning of the movie, not towards the end of the movie, where everything really kind of picked up and it really kept me going. At one point in the beginning, I was like, oh man, this is just, maybe it's just a little too slow for me. Maybe what people were saying is right. I just don't know what to think about it. And then as we got into the second and third acts, I was like, great, this is actually really fun. And I like the tension that's been built up. And maybe there isn't as much scary things as it was, even though Patrick's brother Joey jumped really, really high in one scene and actually startled me. It's a pretty good jump scare that they had in it. Came out of the middle of nowhere, I'll tell you that. And, that's something that could be, maybe there could have been more of that, or you could have showed more of the creature, which, again, like I said, the creature effects in this movie are just utterly fantastic. And for a lot of these creature movies where, there's been little to no creature, this has been a good one to see, and to see all that stuff. So, yeah, a 3.5 is in the right way. And, I mean, most of you guys know my scale, where 3 is just a good movie. It's something that you could watch again. 4 is a great movie, and 5 is just an utter time classic, right? And then 2 is pretty crappy, but it's got some good things. And then 1, it's not worth your time at all. And I feel like if you were really interested and really engaged with this by the trailers, I think that you're going to really like this movie, especially if you don't know anything about the story. If you're so into the short story and you're just like, oh my God, I'm so glad that they made this into a movie, I feel you're going to be disappointed because you're going to want it to be exactly the same. And it's kind of like everybody when it comes to the book compared to I mean, I used to be that guy back in the day where like, oh, it has to be like the books, even like something stupid as The Dark Tower. Like I really wanted to be the books, but they're like, oh, we're trying to do something different. It still wasn't a good movie, but I'm like, I'm not trying to judge it just based upon the books itself or the story itself. And I get it when it's something that you really love and that you finally see it. It's like they make a live action version of Neon Genesis Evangelion, like the original series, and they try to make it live action. They butcher it to death. I'd probably be really upset and be like, man, this is stupid. Or, if the new Cowboy Bebop series that's coming up, if that's really, really, really terrible, then it'd be like, ugh. But I have the original too, and I can go back and I can watch the original whenever I want to watch the original. And so it's not that big of a deal. I just won't continue to watch that. So, it's one of those things. I really enjoyed it. I think that it's worth your time. It's definitely worth a watch if you're just interested in seeing it, and you guys should go see it. So, hope you guys like this little mini review. All these 31 and 31 reviews that I'm doing here on the channel. Tomorrow is Halloween, and I hope you guys like the movie that I have planned for that day. So, thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Don't forget to check out the podcast. Today should have released the Victor Crowley episode, so if it hasn't released already, it's going to release sometime today. And so make sure you guys check that out, and we'll catch you next time on one of these 31 and 31 reviews.